Hello there, my name is Stephanie and welcome to my YouTube channel, Garden of Mirth. Today I'm going to show you how I do Thanksgiving meal prep right now in early November to make the holiday season easier. Today I'm going to be making roasted pumpkin puree for pumpkin pies this Thanksgiving, as well as making pie crust to keep in the freezer to simplify dessert making for Thanksgiving and even Christmas. Follow along with me as I prepare food from scratch for the holiday season to make the holidays stress-free and most of all, delicious. Today I'm going to be using a cushaw squash that we actually had out as a porch decoration for my roasted pumpkin puree. I noticed it had a small blemish on it. I decided instead of letting it rot, I was going to make delicious pumpkin puree. First thing I'm going to do is give my squash a good rinse. You want to make sure that you cut your squash into pieces that will fit on a baking sheet. You can use any kind of winter squash that you have so long as it's a sweet winter squash. So something like a butternut or like a cushaw like I have today, an actual pie pumpkin, anything like that will work just fine. We are going to roast our squash at 425 degrees for about an hour. I start checking mine about 45 minutes in and I just keep checking, and I'm looking for when the squash is fork tender. The skin will start to puff up and pull away. It's okay if the skin gets a little burned so long as your roasted squash is fine on the inside. You want a deep, rich caramel color wherever the squash touches the pan. That shows you that the caramelization has occurred. Caramelization brings out the natural sweet flavor of the squash, but it also gives a depth of flavor that you just can't get in canned pumpkin. Once you have your squash cut up, you want to make sure that you have scooped out all of the seeds and the stringy flesh. If you're using a butternut or a cushaw squash, all of this is in the rounded bottom portion of the squash. You want to make sure all of that is nice and cleaned out. I'm using an ice cream scoop. I find that a metal ice cream scoop makes the perfect tool to get all of that out nice and easy without bending a spoon or something like that. You can either take the seeds and roast them, or you can do what I'm doing if you have chickens and give your girls a nice treat. Because I'm using such a large squash, it's going to take 2 baking sheets to fit this cushaw in the oven. So once I get the squash in the oven, I'm going to go ahead and get started on the pie crust. Today I'm making 2 different kinds of pie crust. The first kind is going to use lard that I rendered from the half hog that we bought. Because I'm making a double batch, I'm going to start out with 10 tablespoons of my lard to 3.5 cups of all-purpose flour. My goal is to make about 6 pie crusts today. That way I have plenty in the freezer for Thanksgiving and Christmas, as well as a few extra to have for things like quiche or any kind of an event that I might need to take a dish to. You can use lard or butter interchangeably in pie crust. They both lend to a very flaky, nice pie crust. You just want to make sure that whatever you're using is nice and cold. You're going to start out by pulsing your flour and your fat of choice, whether that's lard or butter, in the food processor until it becomes like coarse breadcrumbs. I kind of have approximates that I go by, and then I judge it from there. I like to start out with 2 or 3 tablespoons of cold water. I'm going to pulse that in my food processor with the flour and the butter. and let it just start to come together. And I'll add another tablespoon here and there until it just starts to form a dough ball. Once I have the dough clumping together, I'm going to stop and put it on a floured surface. Where I can press all of that dough together into a nice cohesive dough ball. And then because this is a double batch, I'm going to cut that in half and wrap each ball in plastic wrap to put in the fridge. If I was going to use this pie crust today, I would let it chill for about 30 minutes, make sure that my lard or my butter is nice and cold again before I roll it out to use it for a pie. You want to make sure that your butter or lard is nice and cold because that's what's going to cause your pie crust to get that nice flaky texture that everybody wants in their pie crust. So I'm going to show you again the exact same process, but with butter this time. So I've cut my butter into little pats and I've added it in with 3½ cups of all-purpose flour, just like the last time. And I'm showing you a nice up-close shot, pulsing that down until it starts to look like breadcrumbs. Then I'm adding my ice-cold water. It usually takes somewhere between 6 and 10 tablespoons of ice-cold water to get it to form a nice dough. But as soon as it starts coming together and I start to see it forming a dough ball in the side of the processor, I'm immediately going to stop, take that out, press it into a ball, cut it into 2, and roll it up and put it in the fridge. I don't want to heat up my butter any more than I have to. Once these are wrapped up, they can go in the freezer. If you're wanting to use them for later, just wrap them up, put them in a freezer-safe Ziploc bag, and store them in the freezer for up to 3 months. If you're making it right now in November like I am, that's perfect because it's going to carry you through Thanksgiving and Christmas. In next week's video, I'm going to show you how I use this pie crust and the roasted pumpkin puree to make the best roasted pumpkin pie. If you are a pumpkin pie fan, you're going to love it. I'm also going to show you how I make my family's chocolate fudge pie. This is very different from the pudding chocolate pie with meringue that a lot of people make. This is more like a fudgy brownie in pie form, and it is absolutely delicious. So if those recipes sound interesting to you, tune in next week and I'll show you exactly how I make those. So I have an up-close shot here of the squash. I'm really giving it a good squeeze so you can see just how nicely cooked through the squash is. I'm also showing you that nice caramel color that it should have. I will be keeping my roasted pumpkin in freezer-safe bags, and I'm measuring out 2 cups per bag. So I'm going to go ahead and label those and start measuring out 2 cups of pumpkin per bag. At this point, you have a couple of options. If you want to, you could go ahead and strain your pumpkin puree to make sure there's no liquid still in it. You can also go ahead and use either a food processor or my favorite, an immersion blender, and make sure it's nice and pureed at this point. I'm not choosing to do that because my recipes that I use this in, I typically use a food processor or an immersion blender to get them nice and pureed anyway. So I'm just going to skip that step because I'll be doing it later when I go to use it. So you can see that I am getting all of the air out of the bag and making sure that the bags lay nice and flat so that way they take up less space in the freezer. This was a very large squash, so you can tell I'm getting a lot of roasted pumpkin from this. I love that because that means I got the kitchen dirty one time and I'm coming away with enough pumpkin to make 6 pies or 12 cups of pumpkin puree for whatever recipe I want to use it in. This pumpkin puree is perfect in pumpkin bread, pumpkin muffins, roasted pumpkin Alfredo, anything that you would use pumpkin puree for. I love having my own roasted pumpkin in the freezer ready to use in any recipe because not only does it elevate the flavor, but it also gives me peace of mind that I know exactly what is in it. And I love cooking from scratch any opportunity that I have, so this just makes it that much easier. Thank you for joining me in the kitchen today. I hope that you came away feeling more prepared for the holiday season. Next week, I'll be showing you my favorite Thanksgiving desserts. If you enjoy cooking from scratch, gardening, and cultivating a happy home, I hope you'll consider subscribing to our channel and giving us a thumbs up and following along at our blog, gardenofmirth.com. I'll see you next time. I would like to thank Alicia at Plow and Pantry for allowing me to join our Thanksgiving Thursdays collaboration. I'm leaving a list of other YouTube channels in the description box below that you can check out as part of the collaboration for more Thanksgiving inspiration.